on this computer and I'll upload to the side. Okay, so anyways, we're talking about brainstorming methodologies for like when you have an architectural question or you're just kind of working your way through a feature and you're not sure. Lee, do you have a preferred method?
No, not really. In fact, well, I suppose I do, and it's ASCII, if that's the right term. Albeit that it's like obviously not a very good job, but just for like so on this issue specifically that we're hopefully going to bounce some ideas around. Like I started with, or it looks like Richard started with, because we were sat together. But just kind of dump in like for the tables. Here's the table name, and here are the columns, kind of thing. But yeah, I haven't ever used anything. I think maybe the problem is I haven't ever used anything, so I don't really know. Like I'm hesitant to gamble with anything. Just yeah, I do miss pen and paper to an extent though.
You did, yeah. So when you say you used ASCII, I can share Chrome to show the screen. You're referring to this?
Exactly that. Just kind of and even like sometimes I'll kind of add dashes and arrowheads to do a little bit more than that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I mean.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I think, writing things down in any format is always really clarifying for me in terms of understanding the thought process. So whether it's like in a sentence or a bullet point or in a table like this, it's definitely a good place to start. But I'm happy to do you want to talk us through the other thing that's great is rubber ducking, right? Talking and realizing.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
you want to shoot us as rubber ducks and talk us through this issue?
Absolutely, that'd be amazing. Thank you. So I'll give you a tiny little bit on Richard, because it's his kind of like his seed that hopefully he might end up kind of being able to build out. So at the moment he has like some bespoke bot type tool thing that his organization have built, which allows them to do, I think I'd basically call it like the waiting, like almost planning poker type situation, where it says, right, here's the issue, vote on how big you think the issue is. But that's like a sealed vote or whatever you want to call it, until the poll's then closed and then the results are visible. So given that, we just kind of bounced around ideas, and obviously the primary voting mechanism, polling mechanism, whatever you want to call it, in GitLab, but even I guess inside Slack, for example, is emojis, right? But I think we've kind of, I don't want to say hit the limit, but there's only that, there's a very specific set of things that you can and can't do with the emojis. And I did sort of so there's some good issues linked, and if you scroll down in the issue description, there's some pretty picture. There you go. That's taken, hopefully there's a link to it somewhere on here, but that's taken from another issue, which I think is a bit more focused on the visualization aspect of the poll, whereas like at the moment we're not really sort of too interested or fussed in that. But there's definitely this thought process about, can we extend, scale, whatever you want to call it, emojis in some way to kind of become a bit more of an official structured, whatever you want to call it, polling system. I've got my doubts, and like I'm hesitant, but maybe I should ask you for feedback before I then dig more into the sort of problem and why and who and what and where.
Okay, so this is an old, when was this issue created? This was 6 years ago. Wow. somebody created this and you said it's more focused on the visual of what this looks like, but you're over here trying to get more into the back end implementation. And I agree with you that polls, I find myself doing polls in GitLab all the time. We were just trying to organize the meetup and people were doing a, you know,
It's a good example. Yeah.
yeah, like what dates work for you, what location, and the current mechanisms we have for that are kind of challenging. You just have to usually comment and say, or you can say, you know, use this reaction emoji to mean this, or this reaction emoji to mean that.
Exactly. You know, an apple is Monday and a pear is Tuesday. So it sounds like you've got a bit of a gut feel that maybe like emojis and reactions aren't the way to go. Okay, well that's good, because it's sort of on the same, like I think that's a really good, like, driving into this one of the specifics there, the fact that we've only got a subset or a limited set of emojis, and you know, even just the I don't know what you want to call it, mental gymnastics that you would have to do to be like, right, okay, pair is this one, so I need to click on pair, as opposed to just being like, right, I want Monday, or I want large, or I want pizza, like, you know, just being able to type or select the option. The other kind of big thing that I'm conscious of, although I know it shouldn't really be one of the top of the list, but is that, you know, from my understanding, I think we've got a table award emoji in the database, and I think it's got probably something like the awardable type and the awardable ID. So that can be maybe an issue, an epic, a merge request, or a note. Maybe some other things like a snippet, and then the snippet ID. Now, if you think of the size of GitLab.com, the number of groups and projects, issuables, awardables, essentially, I'm pretty sure there's going to be tens of millions. I mean, if I wasn't so lazy, I'd run a quick query to see how many records there are in that table. But, you know, the size of it is going to make it fairly unsuitable to extend that table in a reasonably simple way. So I've talked myself and hopefully some others away from that idea, but yeah, does that sound okay so far?
So so you were going to reuse the awardable, not awardable, what is the table called?
Award emoji. I think that there's an idea that we've already got, you know, lots of polls and voting happened in GitLab, and, you know, maybe a logical iteration or step could be to try and kind of iterate further on the award emoji type mechanic. But I'm sort of seeing, like, I sort of feel that wouldn't be the right approach, that we might be able to extend it by graph, like doing a pretty picture and making things, like, extend it just a tiny bit. But I think we'd soon hit this kind of like, no, actually, you know, if we want to do this, we kind of really need to move it away from there. So my gut feel is to step back and kind of say, well, if we were building this from scratch, what would it look like? Which kind of then takes us to this very poor ASCII table diagram that you've got in front of you there. And you know, me, Richard, were kind of bouncing the ideas around, and realistically, as a first iteration, in my head, I feel that all you really need is, I don't know if you would call it an entity or a model or whatever, but this kind of poll object that says this is a poll. It needs an identifier, and potentially a name, a description. Like in future, we'd like to have, like, when it opens, when it closes, you know, all sorts of other stuff. But you always need this kind of entity, let's call it, this model. Now I've put a no ID on there, but I don't know. I don't know whether that's quite right. My thinking initially was, well, if you can add a poll to a note, then you can add it to an issue, you can add it to an epic, you can add it to a merge request, any work item, snippet, you know, pretty much the world's your oyster there. So that's kind of just creating a poll, like forget about any functionality, but just it's an object. I've created it and it's attached to something. It's got an identifier. Then I feel like, again, the simplest then for the voting side of things, the simplest thing would be to let's just talk about the table and then we'll talk about the kind of quick actions or however we were going to interact with that. But then, I think it would be simplest to actually allow, I don't know if you call it like an open-ended poll, like you can vote with whatever you want. So you can say, hello, goodbye, yes, no, Apple, whatever. So it's not like here are a set of options, choose one of those options. It's open. Architecturally, it feels like the simplest solution. So, you know, then all of a sudden you need a second table just to link, here's a poll, and then for that poll, this is the vote, and this is who the vote was from and when the vote was. Again, can't immediately think of any, but all of a sudden, magically from two tables, you seem to, or in my head, you've got, you know, structurally what you need to have a poll, submit votes and sort of view those results.
Interesting.
So again, go on, give me your initial thoughts before I dig into sort of quick actions and other bits and pieces.
Quick, Smriti, do you have any immediate reactions to this plan, this idea, this?
For a simplistic polling implementation, I think it's a good approach to start with. It just occurred to me whether we already have, I don't know if it is relevant to this issue or not, but whether we don't already have some gems out there, Ruby gems, which work for polling mechanism. So
good idea.
Maybe we can, we can just take a look at those and see if there is something that we are missing.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea. So if there was a gem, and I mean the obvious answer is to Google for it now. If there was, I'm trying to think what it would actually take. Do you know what I mean? What would it take care of, and what would it avoid us having to? Because, like, obviously we need somewhere to store the data, so we're going to need to build the tables, right? Regardless of whether we leverage a gem, or am I wrong? Is there some way that a gem might avoid us needing to even build out the data store?
I don't know. I think the database will be needed. If you want to store the polling results, the votes have to be stored somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just having
So for a simple, if you want to create a poll, is like a big entity, and the poll can have multiple votes.
Yep.
You can vote down, you can vote up. According to that, these two tables, they look good enough. But more actions we can do around polling. Let's think about that.
I did just have a quick search. The word poll is coming up with more polling, as in like try, like, retry, like
Yeah. I was gonna say like Ruby toolbox. Does that still exist? Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. Maybe it will show like poll. It will show.
I suppose maybe vote as well, but
poll tracker
presents top polls.
What does poll everywhere do? Okay, but I want to know what it is. Poll, I don't know what poll everywhere is, I guess. This seems like it's, oh, multiple choice poll.
I'm trying to figure out what the gem like. I guess in my head, I think maybe could do some of like the rendering, but I'm not sure. Like, we obviously again we need to
Yeah.
integrate.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting though, because there is a world in which we use an external service. We would of course have to get approval to do this, but maybe we just have an API key and that all the poll data lives in poll everywhere as an example. I don't know if this would be a good choice, and basically what we're doing is we're just sending API requests to poll everywhere. They're generating a poll. Maybe we just link, maybe the MVC of that approach would be we get a link to the poll everywhere poll and people can vote via GitLab as the UI.
Yeah, that is an interesting, and I think again that was kind of not exactly discussed on the old issue, but I think again the old issue was about visualization. So there was an idea that we might be able to use. I struggled to think of the name of the things. Have you used Shields? I think it's shields.io. Let me just check. Shields. Yeah, shields.io. Have you used anything like that before?
No.
So essentially you can put together like a query string and it will just generate you a badge.
Oh, cool.
So it's used to generate things, like we've got our pipeline status and our code coverage and things like that. You can use shields.io to generate those kind of badges. But the cool thing is you can embed it. So let's say, I've got my website on my GitLab README. I can reference something and I don't have to kind of create the image or keep updating the image or write any code to do that myself, because there's an external service. So, like you say, with an API, we might even just be able to say, right, here's the award emoji data, and can you render that into a pretty graph for me? Just by using a special URL. But I think with all these things, the challenge is I suppose I could see them as MVCs, but I don't know that we could then iterate on those without kind of basically being like, right, now throw this away and now build something in GitLab, if that makes it or throw this away and now stop bastardizing award emojis, or everything seems like, okay, great, we could get one or two things, but without kind of building it as a first-class citizen is the term that I see used quite a lot, and that's the way to sort of to move forward. I'm sure I can still be convinced.
I had another idea here, which was, and this is thinking MVC, and this might have the issue you were talking about where it's much too
closed kind of.
Yeah, like it's it's like an MVC that you're going to throw away and build a new thing. But if we wanted to avoid creating a new database table structure, whatever, which we shouldn't necessarily avoid that, but also that's a lot of work, as we all know, getting those things approved, having, designing it and getting and all that is tough. Would there be a world where, and I'll just try to show you through a comment, where we create a / commands that's like create poll, and then the first argument is like, this is my title, this is my description, and then the options are 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what this does, rather than creating a poll object with these attributes, it actually outputs a new comment from me. It's just a comment object, and it just says like, Jesse is creating a new poll. This is just an example. It could be anything. If you and wants your opinion, please vote for 1, 2, 3, or 4 by responding to this comment with vote 1 or whatever, right? And then what that would do is that would leverage our existing, that would basically do an emoji reaction. Now, how would you map the vote to an emoji? That I don't know. So how to map vote to emoji. But the benefit of this is just that there would be no additional data. Basically, you're just hooking up a slash command to create comments for you. Now you could argue that, is this really saving us? Is this doing anything interesting?
Yeah. No,
Right?
it's nice to come up with these ideas. So, and like what's really interesting is that kind of describes pretty much how we envisage this feature, but just not piggybacking off of the existing like emoji structure, table, etc. I haven't seen too much resistance in the past to kind of creating new tables, so I don't think there'd be a big concern. I think so. I don't know all the quick actions, but I think that like create poll and then maybe with like one option, like a title or a description, or maybe even a sort of suggested list of responses or something like that is cool. I think once you get to multiple arguments, you start getting a little bit to I don't know what you want to call it, but you know, risky or whatever, you know, like spend time's the only one I can think of off the top of my head, where you do /spend, how much time you want to log, and then you can put a date afterwards to like backdate your time log. But other than that, I can't immediately think of any that kind of take multiple arguments. So so here, yeah, and it kind of a nice segue back to to kind of this kind of proposition.
So what actually happens here? Because I realized that this doesn't include any of the poll data. So what happens when I do the slash command? What am I shown?
So I think your sort of what you talked us through there was quite nice, that it just kind of maybe says, so create the object in the poll table, and it'll maybe render your comment, but like you say, it'll be like, right, so you've really put a message in. This is the only argument I guess I'd have, that you could write your own message, so it might not be necessary, but I was thinking that, yeah, that would convert it into what's just below, which is kind of like your comment, your note, but then just with kind of some placeholder that just kind of says poll, no votes, or you know, there is an active
so there's no
poll,
options. It's not a multi-choice.
No,
poll.
and I
it's
think
an open-ended.
And this is interesting. Some people love it, some people hate it, but my thinking is that at the moment all we have is multiple choice, yeah, with award emojis essentially. Like that's the only option you have. Now in the new world we want both. We want to have open, but we also want multiple choice. But the smaller iteration is the open-ended option. To make it multiple choice, like we're going to have another table which will store the possible values, and a way to then validate against that, and you know, there's more complexity. So in my head I'm thinking the simple initial step is an open-ended one, that just kind of, right, okay, we've now got a poll object, an entity, a model, whatever you want to call it, but we've got no votes. Now people can start to use quick actions to vote on that poll.
I'm sorry. So here you're keeping the voting as open-ended. Like there are no fixed set of options to vote for. They can vote for any open-ended option.
Yeah. So a good example would probably be something like, like we want to do a meetup, like when works best for you, or we want to do an evening social, like what any ideas, and you could sort of be like, I fancy going bowling, or I fancy going to axe throwing, or whatever sort of. So I do agree that, you know, closed or multiple choice is like a huge use case and would have to come very, very soon. But
Yeah.
it would be definitely more substantial build to start with multiple choice.
But if you keep it open-ended, the voting, it will be quite staggered because I don't know if any option will get more than one vote this way.
Yeah, it could be like large,
Capital L, large,
Yeah,
huge,
yeah.
big.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, like, I think that that's, you know, it's a possibility it might happen, it will happen, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I don't feel that that should stop, you know, like it
Yeah,
moving
the
forward. And
first
obviously,
iteration, yeah.
exactly. And then what I would see, like, so if we want to fast forward like a year, 2 years or whatever, then okay, first of all, you can do multiple choice. Or if you want it open, but you want to avoid this issue, then obviously once you've got your poll, there's obviously a UI. So once people have started to vote, you can see the existing votes and you can click on them, or there's an easier way. So, you know, quick actions clearly isn't the end goal, the kind of North Star or whatever they call it. Quick actions is a really nice, easy, quick way to avoid us having to build any kind of APIs. You know, we can get straight in there, and with I'm ever the optimist, but you know, I believe that if somebody wanted to, that they could put this together like in a month or so to build a couple of tables and a couple of quick actions.
Okay. So I have a few questions. The first is, does a quick action prevent the need for an API? I've never implemented one. I actually really want a quick action. Maybe I can steal this person from you, whoever this person is who wants to create this. Will you say the person's name was? Richard?
So,
Richard, if you're listening, I would like a quick action that runs pipelines.
oh
That's
yeah,
my
well,
dream quick action.
I can't remember if we've sat down to it, but we tried at one point to do the run pipeline and then set merge when we tried like pairing on that in a session at some point, but for some reason it was a bit of a non-starter.
Yes, yeah, I think, I don't know, the run pipeline thing I've also heard is challenging, but there is an open MR for it somewhere that I've looked at that the person made good progress, but there's something with like the asynchronous nature of it.
Gotcha.
That caused problems.
But addressing your question, yeah, it avoids the need for, so when we build like view components, pretty much rely on GraphQL APIs for the most part. So if we want a view component, like a visual way of interacting, then we need a GraphQL API. If we wanted the REST API, we don't really use that much. We don't really consume it ourselves that much. That's really for allowing someone else to kind of push and pull data into the system. But quick actions are using, let's say they use the notes API. It's not really an API. It's the notes controller, essentially. To send the note, and then there's a service that then processes those quick actions, essentially. So it bypasses the need for like an API, as I'm sure you know, it's kind of has to be well defined and then versions. You can't just, whereas with these internal like services, we can do whatever we want with it because we're the only ones that are kind of using it and consuming it. It also means actually that if somebody wanted to build their own front end for this voting, then they could, because all they would have to do is create notes with the quick action, if that makes sense. So they don't need to use a polls API. They can just use our notes API. And I've seen a tweet or something about this recently, like bigging up our quick actions so much because it's so powerful, allowing us to, you know, do almost anything just by using the notes API rather than having to, I want to merge a merge request. I need to use this complex API call and I need to understand it. Or it's like, well, no, just use /merge. I want to
Okay,
approve
yeah.
it, just use /approves thing. So
Yeah,
anyway,
like
I
that.
digress. But yeah,
Okay.
we wouldn't need I mean, don't get me wrong, I love APIs and I'm sure we'd want to build it again fairly soon down the line, but I see an MVC as being possible with 2 tables that I mentioned above, and probably just the 2 quick actions, one to start the poll, one to vote. And I guess it's just how we do visualize. Like I say, I'm expecting it to be quite rough around the edges, maybe just like in the original note that's created the poll, there's just the word poll or something, and a bullet point with each response and the number of votes, or something fairly.
I had one suggestion on this, that probably, I mean, since you're starting with only 2 tables right now,
Yep.
so instead of making it open-ended, like any option, because that might not bring up any result in the end, just keep it like 2 options, like yes or no, up or down, and you give those options, whatever options you would like the user to vote with, along with your polling text, that these are the options we're expecting from you.
So you
Yeah.
kind of start poll, yes, no, start poll, small, big, start
Yes.
poll, pizza.
Yeah, small, big, medium, maybe.
Yeah.
Not 2 or 3 options, not more than that. So that still has some I mean, that still has some what do you call, I would say it might create some result.
My sort of view on that is, if we're going to give them options, I think we may as well just give them as many options as they want, because what we might do based on that suggestion of just having 2 options, I think what the temptation would be to store those 2 options in the poll table, and then that wouldn't scale if we were just having, right, okay, here's our poll ID, here's if we wanted a title or description. I don't think we really need it initially.
No, you don't have to store the options in the poll table. That's not what I'm saying. But when you're creating the text for the poll, just suggest that these are the options, these are the possible options we are looking for.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So to just say, right. Okay. Yeah. But then ultimately, I guess that's down to the person creating the poll can say whatever they want. If they want to say, please either vote yes or no, or please vote either bowling or golf, or please vote with however big you think this piece of work's going to be. Like it's down to so you think that the title or description is quite important, is what you're saying, because it's going to be the thing that tells them how to vote, like what exactly to vote for. That being said, my slight counter argument to that is that if this is done by a quick action, then whoever kind of adds that note can write whatever they want in there at the end of the day. So, Jesse, your example earlier here, perfect. Yeah. So Jesse is creating a new poll and wants your opinion. That bit we could automatically create, but at the same time, if we automatically create it, then it's in a sort of fixed format. Whereas if we just say, well, you describe it to your users, if you want to at all, then at all. If you want to sort of say, it's down to you.
Yeah.
Fine. Cool. We can actually come up with this MVC and see what exactly people vote like.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. One question I had, Lee, in terms of the implementation here is, I assume that when I respond with /vote per here, that's going to update. You saw me as you heard, I added this to your comment. So would that be the plan, that we would use the current users kind of session to update the original comment created by the poll creator?
So this is, I'm really glad you asked, because I probably would have forgotten about this bit, but the kind of maybe the hardest decision, but I could be completely wrong. So we got two simple tables, we got two simple quick actions. And the only thing we're then missing is actually rendering something, right? So how do we render it? So I've got a couple of ideas in my head, and I probably need to have a bit more of a look at how we currently, what references look like, if that makes sense. You know, we can reference like an issue or a merge request, we can reference a user, there's lots of different types of reference. I think in my head, all we really want is a reference in the note to the poll. And then it's just down to the renderer. I think we use something, is it called like Banzai or Bonsai or something? That the engine will just, when it renders, when it passes the note, it will see the reference and it will then explode it, if that makes sense. And it will say, oh, this is poll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go and grab the results for that poll and render that text. So we never actually need to update the note. It's just a reference and it renders the results of the poll. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's I assume Bonsai is the thing that, I'll go to rich text view, that shows this as the title of this MR, because I have put a plus next to this, and then if I don't, it shows this as the reference, right?
But even that is being rendered magically, right? Because you typed in a URL and it's not just rendering the URL, it's actually rendering the reference, I think we call it, is that, yeah, exactly. So that's still being passed. So yeah, exactly. And I've not really dug into that, but I hope that that's a fairly extendable. The fact that we already allow references to milestones, to epics, to issues, merge, there's a lot of different referenceables in the system, and I hope that being able to add another referenceable wouldn't be too challenging.
So we are going to attach these polls with the issues, MRs, like that, with anything you can attach.
I see them, I see the most flexible being able to attach it to a note. But that being said, I don't know if you make it a sort of a, I don't know what you call it, like a markdown, a bonsai, banzai thing. It might be that it can be in a note or a description because they all use the same parser, the same renderer, so maybe it doesn't matter. But my thinking was that you could have a lot of threads on a merge request or an issue, and like for example, this issue that we're talking about today, right? I might ask you to vote on, should we have multiple choice as the first iteration, or should we have like open-ended as the first iteration? That might be one poll, but then I might have another poll that's like, oh, should, like, you know, is quick actions an acceptable first step, or do we need to, you know, that I could have multiple polls on the same issue. So I thought that having it tied to a note, I thought was kind of a good idea. But at the same time, I'm not even sure we're going to need that foreign key reference because of the way that the references work. But there's a lot. I'm currently in like big conversation around issues and merge requests and how they relate to each other at the moment. And I don't know if you know, but that's not something that's stored in the database, and it's not something that's available via the API. So it's very horrible and messy to try and understand whether an issue is related to a merge request and vice versa, because you have to use this bonsai rendering thing to basically pass text. So that's like, in my head, I think maybe I want to try and make sure there's some easy mechanism of actually relating the poll to a note or an issuable or something. Even if we don't need it, it's kind of supplementary data that allows us to do something in the database rather than having to have this huge engine pass all of the notes in the system to be able to say, oh, by the way, you've got this poll in this issue or this poll in this.
I would confirm, oh, sorry, me.
That's okay. Actually, I'm a bit confused here. I don't, I mean, I'm not able, it's getting difficult for me to imagine how it will work. It's like in an issue, in a comment, we would try and use a quick action and create a poll
Yep.
with the text. As a reply, I can vote to that particular comment as /vote. I can reply, and my vote will be recorded.
100%. Yeah.
Again, due to the quick action API, notes controller API. Now, if I delete my comment, will that vote be deleted?
Ooh, good question.
So not something
I
I've
don't think so.
considered. Not something I've considered. Like if we didn't consider it, then the poll and the vote would still exist but never be rendered anywhere because you've deleted the reference to it.
Okay. And what if I edit my vote? That will be edited.
So you wouldn't be able to. So quick action, once you submit it, it disappears, right? So
yes.
you again, what that brings up a couple of good ones, and thank you, Jesse, for saving us having to rewatch this video and adding some notes on here. So one of the interesting questions is, should someone be able to vote multiple times? Or and I like it. I really glad you brought that up, because my thinking would be that it should, maybe the primary key on the votes table, or an index at least, would be on the poll ID and the user. So if you vote and there's already a record in there, we could maybe use upsert or something like that. So it would insert a new record if you haven't voted, but if you have already voted, it would update your vote. So again, we could almost get that for free without having to kind of build this specific new mechanism to update votes. We could just say, well, if someone votes and they've already voted, let's just update their vote.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
One question I had, and I don't know if any of us know the answer to this, but in terms of, I think it's very clever, the idea of using Bonsai to expand. Basically, there's an object somewhere in the database. We're going to use this tool we already have called Bonsai to expand the reference to that, to just kind of render it visually. I'm not aware of any other resources that we reference that don't have like a view, that aren't URLs, right? So this wouldn't be a hyperlink. You don't want a hyperlink to the poll because you're not going to create a view for the poll. So you can't click through to go to anything. So I'm curious if Bonsai would actually work if there's just a database table.
I feel like it should be okay, because where you've referenced that issue with a URL, if you just get rid of everything before 415 whatever and just put a hash there instead, and so the opposite way around, sorry, so hash 45 blah 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 blah, and get rid of the URL at the beginning.
Okay. Oh yeah,
that works too, right? It does make it into a hyperlink,
yes,
but you don't have to put a hyperlink in. The Bonsai, whatever it is intelligent enough to say, oh, something with a hash at the beginning is a reference to an issue. Something with an exclamation mark is a reference to a merge request. Something with an ampersand is an epic. And we've actually, I didn't realize how many of these we've got, but we've pretty much run out of special characters now. So
really, yeah, because I know the exclamation point is for issue.
Yeah, so there's like
percent is milestone.
Yeah, there's like a tilde and a hat, and there's all sorts of weird stuff. So yeah, exactly.
What's money sign? Money sign.
It's for issues. No.
There's also issues.
Sure
what about carrot? Money sign.
We use it for something, but maybe there's no autocomplete on it at the moment.
Wait, hold on.
That's preview. What does that link to?
What is that? It's an issue, but it doesn't. Ooh, you just found a little bug.
Oh, that's interesting.
Bug. It's kind of a bug.
I wonder if it can be used for work items or something like that.
Replace with hash.
Money sign.
You want to see if it links to the same?
Magdalene, look, it's linked to the old 415232.
It's I see, it's the ID, not the IID.
Oh.
So if you use hash, it goes to the IID. If you use dollar, it goes to the ID. I never knew that. Well, you taught us something today, just
Well, but it doesn't work if I do this.
What is IID?
So the IID is the project ID. The ID is the database ID. So yeah. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Nice.
So
okay, so we have a lot of these. That's interesting.
yeah, but like I think we've got to a point now. So with the contacts, the CRM stuff that we built out, we just use like contacts or like something a bit yeah, I don't know what you want to call it, but like we've given up with just trying to use like a single character, and now we've kind of got more of an identifiable string. So I don't think that's a huge kind of challenge. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Another thing that came to my mind is that you should have an option to close the poll sometime, right?
That's definitely so. I kind of I got distracted halfway through giving Richard's use case. So Richard's got this bot that they've built in some other like chat platform that does a couple of things. So first of all, yeah, they start a vote. I think they can set the end time from the beginning. The voting is hidden, so they can't see each other's votes, and then when the poll closes, then the votes are revealed. So definitely
using the Banza engine, we'll be revealing the results by using the Banza engine like that.
So yeah, I guess that I see that the polls table would expand to have like a state or a status, or maybe it would have a closed date, and if the closed date has passed, or if it's null or something, then it would render the poll. If it was in the future, then it would just render a placeholder to sort of say, you know, poll still open or whatever. But again, that's I think that I really see a nice, small, easy 2 tables, 2 quick actions, looks a little bit messy, very rough around the edges, but does the job. And then it's like, right, okay, we can start making it look sexy with bar graphs and whatever. We can start adding some kind of buttons or autocomplete to the quick actions with multiple choices. We can have open and closed dates, and you know, all sorts of maybe even, you know, what you were kind of alluding to there, Jessie, about polls needing links or not, sorry, about references normally having a hyperlink. Maybe even in some world there will be a place in the system where you can go to polls and it will kind of link you to the poll, and the poll, like the comment or the issue or whatever, you know, whatever, the world's your oyster, right? Once you build the first.
Yep. Cool. The only other thing I thought of that hasn't come up yet is like the potential for abuse. I do think the comments about making votes unique, that's helpful. The abuse part is more just like, are people just going to pop in and like vote on whatever and kind of leave? Because the voting in this MVC, and of course, maybe we shouldn't worry about abuse for MVCs, but like if the person who plays the vote is somewhat invisible in this MVC, is that going to be a problem for any reason from an abuse perspective?
So yeah, that's interesting. So almost like we need to, because when so if someone gets blocked or abuse, then all of that like comments and issues and other things all kind of, I don't know if they get deleted or they're just invisible, or maybe they probably get deleted. So we should sort of try and tie into whatever mechanism is behind the scenes there. The other the other thing that it's kind of made me think of, which again I think is for future iterations, but that you would want to visualize potentially, or be able to drill down into the who, like the idea I was seeing, the first one, like I say, would be bullet points, like one person, big, two people, medium, no people, large. Well, not no people, but whereas, you know, going forward, you want to see like, oh, Dave was the one that said that he thought this was going to be a big piece of work. Oh, Dave, why do you think this is such a big piece of work? So that's definitely something. And that's, you talking about abuse made me think of that, because, oh, like, you know, poopy pants comes up in my poll, and how do I know who's actually done that in order to even be able to report them? Or if can I get, as a poll administrator, can I even get rid of that vote somehow? So I think that they're definite things that we need to address further down the line, but hopefully not blockers.
Yep. Okay, yeah, it's always good to think about abuse options. Also, like, yeah, I'm sure one day if this moves forward, there will be a cool kind of visual aspect. I know I like think Twitter voting is pretty cool. I actually added an add-on to do voting in iMessage at one point. There's some like funny, it's not native. They make it look native, but it basically puts a comment in, and then when you vote, it takes the person to like a URL, and then it places their vote, and then it updates the image back in the shared text.
Nice. So that's sort of almost the API external thing that we were talking about before.
Exactly. Native definitely feels better. Like when I did that with some friends, we were trying to, do you know the app Doodle for coming up with a shared date to do something?
Oh yeah, I use that. Yeah, absolutely.
I worked on a version, something very similar to that, like 10 years ago, for Microsoft. It was terrible. Sorry, Microsoft. It was an example app. They were trying to show like what cool things you could do by using Yammer OAuth. So we were building this example app.
Oh, cool.
And it was like, use your corporate Yammer login to like find a good meeting time. And my basic takeaway from that is that writing polls is really hard. The UI aspect of writing polls is really hard.
Interesting. So I didn't immediately know what the Twitter polls look like. So I just Googled, and yeah, it's quite a nice, simple, you know, bar graphy type thing, right? Yes. The word overlaid on the what's it, and then the percentage. The only thing I've said, and it's good because we've got the existing issue. The old one from 6 years ago is very much talking about the visuals. So I think we've got like quite a lot of that conversation captured. There's a definite fun and games that someone's going to have when they come to do that, because of like, oh, if something's like got very few votes and the text doesn't fit inside the bar and all those kind of, but hopefully I won't be the one that has to worry. Or, you know, maybe I would cheat and I put the word on the left and the bar on the right. Something like
That's nice. That's a good idea. Yeah, the visual aspect is hard for sure. And I was going to say also about Twitter polls, one feature of Twitter polls is they don't show who votes on which thing. Okay. And that's actually intentional. So you can like feel safe voting on something.
Well, again, I really like the idea of flexibility, you know, like let's extend this, and you know, one thing you can have is that a poll is will always remain anonymous, you know, that you can't see who's voted on what, unless someone's self-hosted and looks in the database, you know. But yeah, I that's what I like about this, you know. I don't see any kind of like, oh, well, we wouldn't be able to do that. Well, yeah, eventually, you know, if someone wants that hard enough, then hopefully they can bring it to the table. One of the challenges I see, I think this will live in Gabe's kingdom. So I've already pinged Gabe, like it feels kind of planish But sometimes these things are a bit like, well, you know, a poll is just as valid on a merge request. So, you know, it sometimes will be hard to find like DRIs and owners, and but you know, from working with Gabe in the past, I know that he's very much like, you know, feel free, go ahead, build it.
Cool. Yeah, I can see people using this definitely on merge requests, especially a lot of the merge requests that comes in. Oh, hi, sweetie. We'll wrap up in a second. Sorry. A lot of the merge requests that come in are like for Rails maintainer, the Rails maintainer group, backend maintainer group, or the front end maintainer. And people are like, and you have to do a full comment, or people just do a thumbs up, but maybe like I can see people on those kinds of
I guess.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
approve it, or they thumbs up. Thumbs down feels kind of like mean, so I don't think we get a lot of thumbs downs, but maybe if there was voting, people would be able to express like a more nuanced opinion. So.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's definite I guess one of the things, and yeah, forgive me because I know we do need to drop in a second, but one of the challenges might be actually that we've then got almost two ways of voting, and like, do we want to try and move people away from using reaction? Do you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden, I think, I don't. I
never
guess,
take away my emoji reactions. I don't want that.
No. I guess it's kind of trying to be like, right, okay, remember what emojis were originally for. Okay, they were for kind of expressing a reaction, right? Okay, this makes me happy, this makes me sad, like I love this. Like I'm excited about, like, a reaction, as opposed to like, do you want option 1, 2, or 3? So I think like a thumbs up or thumbs down on like a feature request or something like that, or a +1 maybe, to be like, oh yeah, this affects me as well, like those kind of things, good. But when you start stretching it a bit further, I feel like there might be this weird transitional kind of like, how do we tell people this feature exists, and how do they choose to use this feature rather than just using the emojis instead, kind of thing.
Okay. This reminds me that similarly, you should check out Slack polls, because those are slash commands.
Okay.
Slack, I think we use simple poll. And
Cool.
just see how that does. I mean, and Slack's obviously very different from GitLab, but you can see like.
No, it's always interesting to see other implementations, and I guess they're not as open as we are, so I wouldn't be able to see how it works behind the scenes, how the data is structured, etc. But although saying that if it uses a third-party tool, then maybe that information would be available.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you so much for diving into that, and feel free to well, you'll be subscribed now if you're going to add some summary comments. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.